Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back now with Body, Mind, Spirit. We are talking to the CEO and co-founder of Health World Online. What is this all about? Well, guess what? Our friend Jim Strohecker is back with us to join us to talk more about this e-wealth, e-wellness, and all that they have with their training programs and so much more. Welcome to the show today. How are you?
Jill, I'm doing great.
Great to see you. Give us a little overview as to who you are and what you do before we dive into today's conversation, please.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I'm a CEO of Health World Online, which was really the culmination of a long journey of just really focusing on human health and well-being, being very curious and not being satisfied with what I was learning or what I was being told through our conventional culture and conventional medicine. So it took a bit of a journey to look under rocks and, so to speak, and find a lot of things from the past that were just amazing ways to stay healthy. And more recently, we've created a wellness coach certification training, actually 20 years ago, but that's one of our major features here, where we began to realize that people,
Wow.
we really had not been educated, or our culture, or even our parents didn't really teach us much about how to take care of the human operating system, so to speak. And so there's a lot that needs a lot of support that we need there. So it's really been a lifelong passion to help, bring, I guess, what you would call sometimes hidden knowledge. And then when hidden knowledge becomes out after some time, things like yoga all of a sudden become like totally mainstream. So when I first got into yoga, it was considered quite esoteric and in many ways quite weird by the average person. So
Got it. Well,
it's
thank
been
you.
great to see where the culture's gone.
Well, thank you for sharing this. And we're excited to have you back today. For those of you that may have missed our podcast last week, you better catch up on it. It was a really good one. And we're excited that you're back today. And let's talk a little bit about, just because if there's viewers out there who are watching, just tell us a little bit about what's behind you, because they could see the wheel in a sense.
Yeah, sure. This is our wellness wheel. It
Yes.
actually dates back nearly 50 years. It was the original wellness wheel by one of the key founders of the whole wellness movement, and it's endured all this time. And actually, it's becoming more popular because it was pretty much way ahead of its time, because it focuses on 12 different life functions. So as you look here, it starts with self-responsibility and love,
Yeah.
which is really necessary if we're going to take care of ourselves and do self-care. If we don't value ourselves, we're not going to value our self-care.
Yeah.
And then everything else here is really like a life function that we do every day. We breathe, we sense, we eat, we move, we feel, we think, we play and work, and hopefully have some good balance there. We communicate. We experience intimacy with various people in our lives on various levels. This is a very broad term based on sort of like trust-based relationships and love of shared experiences and interests. We search for meaning in our life. And then finally, in the higher dimension of our life, we transcend from the perspective of we overcome obstacles. We learn how to really get more in the zone more of the time, so we really can be in a state of flow. And then we also a lot of us really find it very important to connect to a higher power, however we conceptualize that. So, so we refer to this as a human operating system because they're life processes that every human being does every day. But because we do them every day, they're sort of like built in, we don't even notice them. And so many times we're just on autopilot and we're not optimizing our potential of who we can be as human beings.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you for that. And what we want to kind of dive in today is about breath for a sec here. Why is it important? We did talk about breath last week, and we'll talk about it again right now, but make a friend of your breath. Why is this so important, Jim?
Yeah, no, that's really a fantastic question. And that sort of phrase eventually sort of came to my mind because for people who become interested in the breath, and that's often like through yoga, meditation, or just through, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I've been checking a lot of hospital websites, and I was blown
Mm-hmm.
away how many hospital websites have breathing exercises in them, mainly from yoga, but they're usually intended for people who have breathing difficulties.
Okay.
But they really can benefit everyone. So think of it. You know, the very first thing we do when we enter this world is we have to take our first breath. And if we're unable to take that first breath, we're not going to survive on this planet. The last thing we do on the, when in our life is
Uh-huh.
we take our last breath. And in between, it's estimated somewhere between 650 million to up to a billion breaths that we take every day. And because it's an unconscious process, we don't have to think about the breath. We don't think about it. But what many wise people going back many thousands of years and cultures all over the world recognize is that by paying attention to the breath,
Yep.
and by following your breathing, breathing more slowly, breathing more fully, breathing more deeply, that some pretty magical things begin to happen with our nervous system, where we're shifting from what's called from the sympathetic nervous system, which we mainly know as fight, flight, or freeze, because that's the state we're in when we're in sympathetic. We're really sort of pumped up,
Yeah.
and because we live in such a stressed culture, many of us just sort of stay in that, pretty much all the time, and it leads to many stress-related disorders. We have
Yeah.
another system called parasympathetic. The fastest way to get into the parasympathetic nervous system is through self-regulated breathing. And when we get there, all of a sudden we discover that our mind, it helps to focus our mind,
Yep.
helps balance our emotions, helps to increase our sensory awareness so we can, function better. And it has huge implications and impact on all of our major physiological systems. So once one realizes that it's like, wow, I need to make a friend of my breath.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm referring to here is not just, oh, I'm going to do a bunch of breathing exercises, because just like anything else, we can practice something and we get distracted and we stop.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some benefit for some time. But the more we can become aware of our breath during the day,
Yep.
so that we're sort of, it becomes a reflex just to sort of check in. When we notice our breathing, usually it shifts, because usually when we notice our breathing, we might be breathing, hardly breathing at all, or I might be like hanging onto my mouse and looking at my
Yep.
computer screen, in a state of a
Yep.
suspended animation. And so as soon as we begin to pay any attention to the breath, it begins to shift. And also, we're able to get into more of a state of presence. And so after a time, you can find that you can be standing in the line at the grocery store or standing in the kitchen and doing all the things you're doing, and actually just be watching your breath and be like very present and very peaceful, where
Uh-huh.
we don't have to be thinking all the time. So this idea of just um, making a friend of this constant presence, that your lifelong companion is literally under the tip of your nose. It's sort of like a great secret. And once you recognize that secret, it's like, oh
It's
wow, why didn't I figure this out before? And the more
right.
you make a friend of the breath, the more it will serve you, to help you stay calm and centered.
And I forgot how to do it, right? Because there is a certain way, but there is a lot of stress and anxiety on us. And I know you're going to go over a little bit more about the mindful breathing technique and process and really how it can help us deal with that anxiety and deal with that stress.
And for example, if you anyone who watches NBA basketball, sometimes you'll see LeBron James for the Lakers. He'll go sit on the bench, and then the camera will go on him, and his eyes will be closed, and he's actually doing self-regulated breathing and to get himself back in the zone and get himself really centered mentally, emotionally, and otherwise, and also doing sort of a form of meditation. So, were you asking for a little bit of guidance right now on?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It says, all right, perfect. Interesting. I think I have an issue with my mute button because I want to make sure it's crisp and clear and it says I'm muted, but you hear me. So I think
Oh, I can
something's
hear you
odd.
now.
I hear, perfect. I have levels. This is odd. But yes, I think a little bit of how should we be breathing, I think is important because people might not understand that part. And I know it's a
Yeah,
process because now I'm thinking
absolutely.
about my breathing and it's making me nervous.
And it's funny because, I mean, there's a real connection between anxiety and breath, so that when we become anxious, usually we start breathing much faster and much more shallow. And as we begin to just slow our breath down, you'll often find like the anxiety after a period of time just begins to let go bit by bit by bit. And sometimes after 4 or 5 minutes of breathing, you're wondering, where did my anxiety go? So it's really with a lot of this, it's just sort of observing what happens when you're doing certain types of breathing. But to make it really simple, there's lots of complex breathing techniques out there. And some of the ones that are being taught are probably, I think, just too complicated
Yeah.
for someone just to start out. But there's just like the most simple practice of just stopping for a second and allow yourself to take, three slow, let's just do it right now. Allow
Yeah.
yourself to, you can close your eyes if it's helpful. If you're driving, obviously, we're wanting you to remain completely aware, but just allow yourself to take three long, slow, deep breaths.
Are we in through the nose, out through the mouth? Does that matter?
At this stage, no. You
Okay.
can
Okay. Okay.
you can do whatever works for you now.
Okay.
And that's just a
Mhm.
good baseline anytime to sort of begin to sort of calm oneself down. Because there's three breaths takes a long enough time. You have a little bit of a chance to shift. And and so that basically with breathing, you have your inhalation, you have your exhalation, and getting into more advanced breathing, that's when they get into the breath holds, which I don't recommend just right off the bat. So basically, just breathing in and breathing out in a nice slow rhythm is really the most beneficial. And then we could try that again, and this time just one of your hands on your belly,
Okay.
and just allow yourself to take three slow, deep breaths, and just see if there's any movement in your hand, if your belly rises or falls.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes I do it opposite because I suck in. So I thank you for reminding me the proper way.
Yeah. So basically, what's happening there is that our diaphragm is at the base of the lungs, and it sort of separates the lungs from your abdomen.
Uh-huh.
And often, if we're not breathing fully, after time, the diaphragm's like a muscle like this, and it just gets sort of, a little bit stuck. And when you're breathing with your diaphragm, as you breathe in, it actually goes down like this. And then when you
Yeah.
exhale, it comes back up and relaxes. So we're wanting to have movement in the diaphragm. And sometimes that takes a little while for people to get to a place where they're getting some diaphragmatic breathing happening. But just really starting with simple belly breathing, whether you're placing your hand over your belly or
Mm-hmm.
just imagine your belly moving, is really a great way to start. And maybe doing anywhere between 5 and 10 rounds of breath,
Okay.
just closing your eyes and being calm, and then just doing 5 or 10 slow, deep breaths in and out, not worrying about the count of how
Mm-hmm.
long you're breathing, because even someone who's done a lot of breathing will find on a particular day they're more stressed. And so what they normally can do in terms of how long they can breathe may may not happen on that particular day. So it's we're sort of in a different space every day. So it's just being sort of gentle with oneself.
Got it.
And
Okay.
but the whole idea here is with the parasympathetic nervous system, when you're able to do some what we call self-regulated or mindful breathing, where you're breathing more slowly, more deliberately, and deeper. you really can't lose with that. With time, you'll
Mm-hmm.
start to see that your capacity to inhale increases,
Yeah.
your your ability to have a longer exhalation, which is very, very calming for the
Okay.
system, increases. And it's really here, like on a call like this, you really want to keep it as absolutely simple as possible. Um, for example, there's I think the world of Dr. Andrew Weil, one of our pioneers of integrative medicine. He has a very popular 4-7-8 breathing technique, and a lot of people are learning this technique as their first breathing technique, and involves uh, uh, a long exhalation, like twice as long. It has,
Okay.
as you hold your breath as well, and put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, and breathe out uh, with through your mouth with a curled tongue, and it's fairly complicated. So um, if someone's learning that from a video, great. But really, the important thing here is not so much what our heroics can be. Because often in yoga classes and whatnot, they'll teach all sorts of breathing techniques, and it can become very competitive, and people can really get motivated to have do the longest session with the longest breath possible, and that's really not the point, because when it all comes down to it, it's just really the simple in breath and out breath, and being aware more and more, just paying attention to your breathing. And just by doing that, it's really going to help calm you and calm the system. And there's so many things that when you begin to calm your system
Yeah.
with breathing, your blood pressure lowers, your heart rate lowers,
Okay.
what's called heart rate variability, which
Like
is
it.
the key indicator of resilience of a human being. That improves, which basically just means that
Okay.
the difference between when you inhale, your heartbeat speeds up. When you exhale, it slows down. And when you have a lot of resilience, there's a lot of difference between the two. When you're really stressed, the difference is very, very minimal. It's called low heart rate variability, and sort of an indicator of stress. And it helps to improve digestion. It
Wow.
really helps all the life functions. It's interesting because the parasympathetic nervous system, and particularly the vagus nerve, govern digestion. So,
Okay.
and the parasympathetic is called rest, digest, restore, meaning that it's
Restore.
best to eat when you're relaxed,
Okay.
because your digestion is going to be better. Your digestive enzymes and stomach acids are going to be released at the right time, and you're going to be able to send the signal from your gut to your brain, I'm beginning to get full. So you
Beautiful.
know to slow down. But when we eat so fast, we never get that signal until we're
Mm-mm.
actually already stuffed. And so you can actually end up eating slower, digesting better, and eating less, just by paying more attention. So there are a lot of exercises to just like breathe before you sit down to, when you sit down to eat. So you sort of calm yourself down.
Okay.
Actually, maybe sit down instead of stand in the kitchen. Or I think I saw a stat where 70% of people in the US have at least one meal a day in the car.
Ah,
And which is that's just a testament to our fast-paced life.
I know.
When we get when our fast-paced life completely rules us, it really has an impact on our health. And the breath is one of the very best ways to stay present and to sort of slow down a bit, so you can be a little bit more deliberate. Because
Okay.
when you're really wound up, you may feel like you have a lot of energy, but you're going to tend to react rather than respond. So the more present you are, the more capacity you have just to be responsive to what's happening, and really be able to perform better, because your choices are much broader than sort of like the knee jerk type of reaction that we have. And athletes are really getting into breathing, because they realize it allows them to be much more present, much more aware, much more in the zone. So it's really gaining a lot of following. Just
Traction. Yep.
time, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing all this. And there's still so much more. Again, we are talking here to Health World Online. This is Jim Strohecker. He's the co-founder and CEO, and he's joining us today again on the podcast. And we're talking all about breath. And again, we're resetting our buttons here and talking about the relationship between mind and breath and how really you're saying is that this breath can help improve the way we eat, the way we think, right? And our diet, and in the end, healthier overall life. And we're going to dive into some pillars of mindfulness as well, and so much more. Let's continue, Jim.
Okay, so you mentioned the reset button. That's so important, and particularly with the digestion, because we focus so much on like what we eat, you
Uh-huh.
know, and we try to force ourselves to not eat this, and we're going to try to make ourselves eat this for a period of time, and then with time we just get tired of it, or we get distracted, or we get stressed, and we blow it off. And the idea here is that when you become more present and more relaxed when you're eating, not only are you going to digest better and eat less and enjoy the meal more. But you start to notice that these things that I'm eating when I'm really wound up and stressed, or when I'm doing like emotional eating or whatnot, they really don't taste that good when you actually eat them slowly. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm much more drawn to have, some fresh vegetables, or to have whatever it might be, some or chicken and vegetables, or whatever it might be, that starts to become more appealing. And people notice this a lot when they're focusing on their diet. When a shift begins to happen,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, what they're drawn to is far healthier than what they're drawn to when they're really stressed. And that's one of the important reasons, to try to to be more calm when you're sitting down to a meal, and to actually sit down if you can, rather than stand or walk around or bring it to your computer, as you
Uh,
know, and
because you
you're
get
multitasking.
distracted and you just overeat. Guilty.
Yeah,
Another thing. Yep.
yeah, because you're not even good. Because when you're like that, you're so distracted. We're not paying attention to what we're eating. It just goes in. So and this reset button is really quite extraordinary. And I like to use that term just in terms of referring to this shift that takes place
Yeah.
when you begin to breathe more slowly. And there's a whole cascade of things that happen. Like you mentioned the mind, and this is one of the most important, because thousands of years ago in yoga, one of the key principle they understood was that that the overactivity of the mind, and the mind sort of out of control, thinking
Okay.
too much. When you start doing like mindful, self-regulated breathing, you start to find the mind becoming much more calm and much more focused, and you can be much more effective. Because often we think that my intelligence comes from all
Yeah.
my thinking, and there's a little bit of truth in that, but a high percentage of our thinking is just repetitive thinking, negative thinking, worried about things, and it just gets in the way of being effective. So I sort of coined a term like, when the mind is calm, the breath is calm. When the breath
Okay.
is calm, you'll find that the mind is calm. And it's almost like a mathematical equation. And even back in the a lot of the ancient writings of yoga, they made this equation. Quiet your breath, calm your breath to calm your mind. Because in yoga, the original focus of yoga was purely to get the mind really calm and focused, to go into deeper and deeper levels of meditation. And the
Mm-hmm.
breath was only really used to focus the mind. And the yoga asanas, in the original, the actual yoga, like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali,
Got it.
there were only three, and they were all seated postures to help you be stable when you
Oh.
meditate. So then there's a whole other school of yoga that evolved, that really got into doing the yoga postures. But the actual hardcore original yoga was really just focused on the mind, purely on the mind, to allow one to go deeper and deeper and deeper inside, and have deeper levels of realization, and to become like a more self-actualized individual. Um, and now, even in tradition, I mean, the yoga most of us are familiar with, that was imported to this country from India, doing all the postures.
Yeah.
good yoga teachers will always have you coordinate all of your movement with your breath. And that's another thing. When you start to coordinate movement with your breath, it makes a huge difference. A lot of runners now, distance
Mm-hmm.
runners, are beginning to learn how to breathe through their nose when they're running.
Okay.
And it's amazing because it's so counterintuitive because they're mouth breathers. And also Iga Swiatek, who is the number one woman tennis player in the world, when she practices, she puts tape across her mouth so she can't breathe through her mouth, forcing her to breathe through her nose, and it really builds her endurance. So there's a whole movement among athletes towards like more nose breathing rather than mouth breathing, because the
Okay.
you can't get nearly as much air in through the mouth, and when you start doing that, you tend to be gasping a lot too. You know, particularly when you're getting tired. So the whole thing is like absolutely fascinating. Like the relationship with the mind and the breath, the relationship with your feeling
Yep.
state in the breath, and how self-regulated breathing or slow mindful breathing begins to calm your emotions and allows you to balance your emotional state. Because, you know, even your grandmother would probably tell you when you were a kid, if you were freaking out,
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
take a deep breath,
for
take a deep
sure.
breath. So we've always known that, but that
Yeah.
was usually like the one time we would ever mention the breath is when
Mm-hmm.
someone was really upset or freaking out. But now we're beginning to understand that it does so much more for everything in our life. All of these life processes, I just created a course called Make a Friend of Your Breath. And I was really fascinated with the impact of the breath on every single one of those life processes. And the more I dove into it, the more profound it became. And so I began to realize, wow, you know, I mean, I was originally taught, you know, pranayama 50 years
Yeah.
ago, and I've been doing it for a long time, and in a lot of different systems and ways. And yeah, it just really sort of blew my mind looking at these life processes and how fundamental the breath was, and really enlivening all of them and allowing us to maximize like more of our awareness.
Absolutely.
Because again, looking at the wheel, each of those areas is usually considered an area unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever like looks at the connection.
True.
And there's whole fields of study where you can, you know, learn so much more about being emotionally intelligent, the feeling dimension, or how to communicate better, communicating, or how enhance your sensory awareness, or somatic training, mindful eating, so many different things, all the different ways we're learning how to move. And the thing is, when we coordinate the breath with all of that, we start to see that there's a even deeper level, this sort of built-in improvement that's sort of wired into our system, into our human operating system. That this is one of the ways, you know, that one of the little tricks we have that's sort of built in that we can use to improve virtually, you know, every area of our life. Because when our mind is more focused and we're clearer, if our feeling state is not getting in our way. And if we're able to have more positive feelings, and if our sensory awareness is such that we have really good situational awareness of what's happening around us, and that's just three of them. I
Yeah.
mean, think of the advantage you have in everything you do with work, with play, with your, you know, your personal responsibilities, with your family. Everything is really enhanced. And you mentioned also like the four pillars of mindfulness. So again,
Yeah.
looking at the wheel, the four pillars of mindful meditation are awareness of breath,
Mm-hmm.
awareness of sensation,
See it. Yep.
awareness of feeling, and awareness of thought. And that's actually built into the wheel. It wasn't intentionally built into the wheel. There was no awareness of that time. Mindfulness meditation was like brand new in the West at that
Wow.
time when this was created. But it makes sense because if you're really looking at core life functions, uh, what the mindfulness meditation is going for is like that deep awareness. And once we can start to be aware of the things that normally distract us, like
Yep.
what's that sound?
Exactly.
You
But
know,
I apologize, Jim. We are almost out of time. So I know we may not be able to finish everything, but we kind of have to
sure,
wrap it up for now. We could always continue next time.
absolutely. Oh, you want me to wrap up?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
so sorry.
I didn't hear the prompt. Yeah. So basically, if you'd like to find out more about what we do, you can go to friendofbreath.com, and that will teach you more about the Make a Friend of the Breath course.
Mm-hmm.
We also have webinars on mindful breathing, free webinars, and you
Awesome.
can find out about that by going to bodymindspirit.com and clicking on the webinar link at the top of the page. And anyone who might be interested in wellness coaching, just go to bodymindspirit.com and click on coach training. So
Beautiful.
yeah, that's a lot of what we're up to. And I appreciate, Jill, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. You do such a great job of pulling out, what it is that,
No,
I'd like to say.
thank you. I'm just here to help facilitate. You got all the information, Jim, and you have a lot. Thank you so much for your time today. Would you mind telling us
Okay.
the website, how we can contact you?
Yes. Go to bodymindspirit.com. And if you want to find out about the Make a Friend of Your Breath course, that's
Yep.
friendofbreath.com. And you can email me at jim@bodymindspirit.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And
Pleasure.
remember to breathe.
Thank you for that and breathe the right way. Thank you for teaching me again. And to all of our listeners and viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.